Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 17 of my Pyanodons playthrough. In this episode, we are going to start breeding Vrauks, which is the final alien life item we need to start on our next science pack. Enjoy! Our new build for cellulose and batteries seems to be working pretty well. It is running continuously, so there's not a lot of chances for junk, but it seems to be working pretty well. And power usage, as high as it is, this does actually save some power. And when you look at the 1 minute power usage, that the electrolyzers aren't even the thing at the top. They're close, but they're not at the top. One other thing we need before we start working on our Vrauks is we need some plastic for some of these buildings. And I like how Pi requires that you make a resource in small quantities to begin with, because you just need them for buildings. The same applies for titanium, where we only needed a little bit to start building things, but it does scale up after a while where you do actually have to automate them. So although in the beginning you only need a little bit, you should probably choose a decent number to get started with. And what do we want to do? We could base it off of the entire output of our syngas. It's an incredible amount, 604. We could just say 600. Actually, that probably wouldn't be a terrible idea, because it's only going to create 6 bars in the end, less than half of a belt. So why not? Each one of these biofactories actually requires 50 duralumin. That's quite a bit. Oops, we needed to connect those together with pipes. It's kind of unusual to have a missing one right there, but they all need their fluid. Oh, and things are clogged. Why is that? Ash. Well, as a temporary patch, I feel like a lot of temporary patches have occurred right here. We could just put an inserter here, and then another one, dumping them back on the belt. We definitely need to do something about all this ash, but we're very close to having electric miners, and that will dramatically reduce the amount of ash we have to deal with, so I kind of just want to put up with it. And you can see how much the power drops after we stop making circuits. And you can see like the electrolyzers just drop. So it spikes and then goes back down. You can see when it drops to this more idle state that the fish turbines are a much more significant part of the power. So that's why I'm hesitant to build more right now. And hey, look at that, the stone belt filled up. Okay, we need to make a bunch of plastic, and it can go anywhere. Doing it over here is related to aromatics. So sure, well, the aromatics are going to come in from somewhere else, but for now, we'll just connect them to the tailings pond. And probably should have thought about this ahead of time, but the alignment of the pipes is going to be wrong. So I guess for now, I'll just connect it here and move them later. So in they go, chugging away at making plastic. It's a pretty easy recipe, and this is definitely something we're going to want to track. So we need a creature chamber and a gene lab. Here's the creature chamber. It's pretty huge. And the gene lab, more reasonable. And there's all of the buildings that we haven't used yet that are a part of growing our first creature. If possible, I would like to do the tiny optimization of piping in the muddy sludge that we have from here. Let's see, do we have another building we can use for this? Sure, how about the 70k tank? So that'll rapidly fill up. We'll put the overflow right in there to dump the extras. We are going to start using more moss, so it would be nice to save any bit of electricity that we can. So some underflows in there just to minimally keep this up. And we probably want to pump in here just to make sure that it's as full as it can be. And there we go. We are saving the muddy sludge, and the sludge producers will probably never turn on now. We should leave them there just so that backup option is always available. The condensates tank is getting really low, and we could hook up shale again, but it's also going to create a bunch of aromatics, which the tank is reasonably full. So we should probably switch to pumping gasoline. So to switch this, we have our pump right here, and it's normally pumping fluids into the fuel pipe. So when you want to switch fluids, you would just reverse the pump that pumps it in, and then it will get empty, and the fluid will stay in whatever storage tank it's in. And then on the thing you do want to deliver, you can do the inverse. And for this one, this is the actual gasoline pipe, so we'll need a separate one right here. So when you want to switch, all you need to do is come here and reverse the flow. So it's turn off gasoline, turn on gasoline. And honestly, you probably could have multiple tanks with their pumps pumping into the system, but if both tanks have really low levels, it might glitch out and they might fight for which one gets to pump in. So I usually prefer to manually turn tanks on and off. And then later on when we get the circuit network, we can make this more automated. But the gasoline is going to last a long time because it's actually a good fuel. Well, now it's time to plan for our Pi Science Pack 1. And there's a lot that goes into it. Ideally, you would probably plan the entire science pack, and then that would tell you how many Vrauks you need to make. But that's probably outside the scope of this YouTube video. So instead, I'll just do Vrauks on their own, and then we will work on the science pack. And here's the build that we're going with. Ultimately, the goal is to make the formic acid. If you're not sure about how big of a build to do with the various alien life creatures, you might just want to base it around a square of reproductive complexes. And the reason why I go with a square of 4 is because when building grids of buildings, like this right here, it just works well to have inserters on the inner corner, and ideally your power poles would be bigger than this, so you basically only need to have one power pole in the corner and it covers everything. So squares of buildings just kind of make sense for builds. But it also so happens to be that this is a good number of Vrauks to make, specifically for the amount of science that I intend to make. So this is a good number. Make sure to put the modules in so the numbers are correct. And it also makes sense because it goes into one slaughterhouse, and those are just nice numbers. They're going to need to have water barrels, but you can direct insert these into the buildings and not have to belt basically empty barrels and then full ones. We are going to have to deliver flora, and that is something that can decay, so we'll have to worry about that. But the thing we want to look at is that an acceptable amount of flora, and is that acceptable amount of moss? Flora, certainly, and our moss setup makes 6 per second, so also that is a good number. However, to even build this, we need to make a couple of Vrauks to start the process, and it's not as simple as make 2 of them and you get more, because we need at least 1 in the reproductive complex to get it going, and then we need at least 1 in a paddock to get it going. Ideally, you'll start with a small herd of them just to jumpstart the process. And here's the general build for it. You'll notice that a lot of junk goes into this. Later on, you'll probably want to build a dedicated setup making all of these resources that you print creatures from, just so you don't have to keep doing this every time you need to make a creature. But to start out, we do want to look at this and make sure the number is reasonable. So if we have 1 creature chamber, which seems fine, we would need to have 1 seaweed farm and then fractions of the rest of the buildings. And that's pretty good. It does require a very small amount of resources from various things, but that should be fine. And we could potentially just put these in the chests to make this easier. And note that this whole thing is only going to print them at a 0.01 a second, so very slowly, but they don't need to be printed fast. It does need to be near flora. Interestingly, it does require automation science packs. So there's a lot of weirdness going on with this. We're going to need some buildings here, such as the creature chamber, the gene lab, the data array, and the incubator. We need a moss farm too. We might as well just take this one. It doesn't need to be here, so we'll just take it with us. Yeah, so this is one of those things where it's just complete spaghetti, and who knows how to go about this. It's basically just kind of crazy. That said, I was going to put it up there, but it does require science packs, and they are down here, and science packs are actually pretty material dense, so it actually kind of makes sense just to make it down here. This is going to be a relatively temporary setup, so it really doesn't matter how crazy it is. You definitely want to automate it though, because I think the intent here is that you build a setup that can print different creatures as you need them. So you do want it to be reasonably automated. I was hoping to show the whole setup run all at once, but it's probably going to be very piecemeal because of everything that goes into this. And this is one of those situations where the machines are going to run so little that just a stack of coke in each one for fuel should basically make them run as long as they need to. So instead of sending a giant belt across the factory, in this situation we should probably just manually insert things, just to make life so much easier. So we need a whole bunch of steel. There's 800 of them. And we're gonna need a bunch of titanium too. Let's let this build up. But there's your titanium, and there's your lead. So they're making the biocontainers much quicker than they need to. And a stack of iron. Oh, we've got that. There you go. That's gonna make the chests that go into that. So we need a bunch of flora, both to print the creatures and to put into the biosamples. So this is going to be a situation where we have to account for the spoilage. And we don't really need to automate it right now. So for both machines, we'll just have an output. And what's great is that we can actually select 2 filters now on our electric ones, that either type of spoilage can be ejected. And if it makes it to the end and it's spoiled, it can just be inserted into that chest. So let's see the incubator go. Wow, 15 flora goes into 1 biosample. That is quite a lot. But it's going, and it sends the biosample into the Earth DNA samples. This is actually pretty expensive. 1 chest, and I guess that's just the container here, but 15 science packs and 10 biosamples. But it seems like it's really slow. But really, the reality is this machine is just super slow. 400 seconds to make 1 Vrauk. So the rest of this supporting equipment does not need to be very fast. And we also need science packs. Luckily, we have them here, so we can just send them in. So it's probably going to take a minute to see this thing going. But we've got that side taken care of. Let's put in the gene lab. Just needs petri dishes and moss. And we've got petri dishes. So that's going. And moss, I don't really want to deliver up here right now. But first, it needs to go into this assembler right here. So you got to do this correctly. And also one of those petri dishes can just go straight across. Now this is going to require agar, which is a spoilable item. So let's set some logic here. Read contents, including crafting. And this one will only go if the agar is equal to 0, because the recipe only requires 1. And some filter inserters out of both of them to pick up any biocrud that might appear. It's got to have its steam. And then the seaweed, which luckily does not deteriorate. And there's some stacks to get it going. Of course, we need an inserter too. There we go. And how about, to make sure this machine doesn't run forever, we'll read the contents of the whole belt and say that it has less than 5 petri dishes on that belt. It's not including these other machines, but since it's alternating between machine and belt, that should be correct. So far, so good. We've got our DNA samples now, so those could be inserted. Now we need a big old healthy stack of moss. Basically, I don't feel like belting all of the resources when it's potentially going to be a very temporary place. And once we're actually making the Vrauks and they need these resources, well then maybe we can do it more permanently. But for now, grabbing big old fistfuls of resources should be good. So in it goes. That's a lot of moss that goes into one of those. We might actually want more than that. That's more than I was expecting. Well, the last thing we need are the codexes, and that's just the instructions to make them. And here, we could basically decide how many Vrauks do we want to make just based on how many codexes we make. And they're more expensive now. They require circuit boards. How about let's go with 20 creatures, and we could just handcraft these. Now we've got some codexes. We put them in, and the machine begins. It's 300-second crafting time. Later on, we're going to want to make caravans, and it's similar to Vrauks, but not quite the same. And because it's going to require similar resources as the Vrauks just to make them normally, that we'll be able to build something a little more permanent. This is only here just to give us our initial population. Kind of want to see this thing complete. And now we need to make the actual build. It won't be too bad. The main consideration is where are we going to put this, because it is probably going to be near where science is going to be made. We may very well decide this is not the best place for science. But looking at the resources, it would need flora and moss. Flora is right here, but it's in the center of our factory, whereas moss is down here. So it probably makes sense to grow them basically around here and just send the flora down. Yes, there will be some spoilage, but it basically takes 4 hours to spoil, and that's pretty decent. So it should survive on a belt just fine. And as always, whenever you're thinking of building somewhere, build it away from the center of the factory, not towards it. And this is very much in the center of the factory. And wow, we're down to our last strip of iron on the starting patch. Well, as long as it keeps up, there's really no reason to remove it. I would rather not rebuild this setup somewhere else because it's perfectly fine like it is. So when the iron runs out, we're probably just going to have to send a belt down from up here. That's basically the solution. Well, we have a shopping list at least. And some of the buildings we've already made because they're in the shrine. Like the slaughterhouse, the reproductive complex, and the Vrauk paddock. And I guess I didn't make a barreling machine, but we will now. We're actually going to need a ton of barrels too. And they are a steel item. Yep, well, there we go. We missed it being made, but we've got a Vrauk. And this seems to be running okay, so we'll let it continue. We're probably going to need a pretty decent amount of barrels to get going. Let's put a barrel machine in here. These barrels do stack in 50s, so how about let's do 200 for now, see how it works. Well, the barrel machine part of this recipe is kind of irrelevant because we're going to direct insert the barrels into each setup, so there's going to be a lot more than one. Okay, we should have everything we need. Let's put it in here and try to line up the building. This shows you how huge this is compared to this setup. It's like 2 of them basically fills the entire area. But we'll put it down here, a nice healthy gap. So there's a lot going on with this building. The water barrels we don't have to worry about, but flora, sap, and moss we do. And if you look at the requirements, the sap is only required for this step, whereas the flora and moss continues. So what that means is we can insert the things that need to continue down the middle, and then the things that don't have to continue can be on the sides, kind of like that. And these buildings are so big, but you see why I talk about doing things in a square, because you can kind of place them all in here. And without modules, we can't use rate calculator to see what the speed is because it's basically 0. But the numbers are so small here that we know just a single yellow inserter will do it. And it looks really weird with the corner of the building like this, but that inserter will work. So we can do something like that, and that would actually be all of the inputs for this building. That said, another thing we're going to want to do is take care of the barrels. And here's what the barreling machine looks like. It's a 3x3. We could put it on the end of the setup and just insert into them like this, but because this is already the biggest and widest part of the build, it's probably better to make it a little longer so these can fit inside. And it does change the positioning of things a little, but stick with me here. Where presumably we have a water pipe going through. Out of the barreling machine, it can insert the full barrels, and then the empty barrels can go in here, and if there was a buffer chest, it would work. And you have to be careful about this though, because the barrels have a way of concentrating on one chest or the other. And I'm thinking of the future when we have robots deliver barrels, so we don't have to like manually insert them to start the process. For that to work, we kind of want to have one chest instead of 2. And I actually spaced these 1 too far away from each other. It's really hard to tell with how big these buildings are. But if we had long-handed inserters, we absolutely can do this, no issue. But because we don't, it's gonna look a little weird where we have to shuttle them in. And that would handle the barrels. We'd want to do the same thing on the other side. And then it's a little awkward because it has to do a bit of a shift right there. Let's make it look super symmetrical. There we go. Now we get to awkwardly place all of these very short-range power poles. And because these buildings are so big, we're probably going to need to give it quite a few lights. So if we just put one light in the middle, that is not enough. So it's probably going to need lights on all 4 corners. But that's actually pretty decent. That's most of it, but we do need to supply some sap. We just need to have 7 of them, and it doesn't really matter where. We can just combine these 2 sides, but because the amount is so low, they don't need to fill both sides of the belt, so let's just do a side switch there to put them all on one side. Because these things use flora, we need to have some kind of system in here to get rid of the decay, and also to output the cocoons. So let's do that on the outside. We have to remember to put filters. It could be barrels, cocoons, and also the decay items. And we should try to keep this sorted if possible. So if we do a little zigzag like this, that will put the decay item on the inside. Now we need to get all this flora down. And the amount of flora in total, it's not too much, it's less than 2. Wow, it's getting so low. I'm not too worried about it running out entirely because running a bunch of belts doesn't require any steel, so we can just let it empty and then dump it in. But we're 9 minutes away, so it's gonna be empty quick. Well, that's done. Who knows what we're going to do with all of this flora. But for now, how about let's connect a few of them together. It's not like it's going to decay any faster because we have multiple machines in a line. The main thing that matters is how long is the belt. And we are going to need to have a system for treating the decay items. But let's worry about that after we have the Vrauks set up. But there we go, all of those are good. I guess we'll grab the 5 that we've made. Put in the sap trees. Normally, I would say don't go through the center of the factory, but because decay is an issue with this flora, I kinda want to do the most zigzaggy of direct paths possible, just to keep the belt distance down. And there we go. Getting the flora. And yeah, this is all running pretty quietly, but it's a pretty boring process once you've got it set up. Okay, flora's gonna get down here and it's gonna need to combine and go straight in. And these aren't actually running, so did stone not get here? They really should have. Well, there it is. For now, we'll put the Vrauks that we do have in some of these machines, just to get it going. So, in goes the sap. And we do need barrels and water, too. Let's just put, like, I don't know, a stack of barrels in each grouping of machines. It's probably way too many, but that is the least amount of clicking way. So we'll connect the water. And now it's getting rapidly barreled and put into the machines. So let's see what this actually stops at, because ideally we'd want all the machines to kind of max out. Or is this just going to hit 50, pretty much? Well, if that's the case, then probably 20 barrels per machine would be good. Let's put in all of the food. These Vrauks are the lucky ones. They simply need to enjoy themselves in the reproductive complex and make cocoons. It's a cool building. I like the X's. Gives you an idea of what's happening in there. There's like a little Chewbacca noise in there too. So we'll let that go. We're going to need to have logic to get rid of the spoiled stuff, but that can wait until we get to the very bottom. Oh yeah, we need these to be set. We clearly don't want to have cocoons in there. So that's one aspect of this taken care of. And we're 1 minute away from the iron patch running out, so it's probably time to do something about that. Unfortunately, there's really no way around just having a giant belt going across the factory, because it has to be a full belt going in here. We could at least send it along the outside, so it won't be super obnoxious, but still, it's going to be pretty big. Considering this doesn't run at full speed very often, I wonder if we can just use the existing mine, because I really don't want to build a second setup, and there's kind of not enough room for it. And honestly, we don't need that much steel. So let's just meter it out between all of these places, and probably give priority to the actual iron, because we need a lot more of that. This can snake in here, and well, nothing's flowing, so it must be empty. And indeed, that is the case. So we'll probably want to do something with this belt. But for now, finally, our starting iron patch is gone. The only patches left are the coal, the flora, and our aluminum. Let's see, this one is going all over the place. It really doesn't need to. Looks like the stone is finally making it here, and the Vrauk breeding continues. Well, let's put some spaces in here, just for other resources to come in. And the concept is kind of similar with the ones above, where we have them in groups of 4, with spaces on each side. The thing that's new is the cocoons need to come in, making sure that the byproduct goes on the inside of the belt. However, we do need to do the barreling machines, and do we put them in between again, or on the outside? This does mean that chests will have to be separate between them, which seems kind of undesirable. So let's build it essentially the same way as this. The complexes are too big, but if we get this positioned, we don't care about the reproductive complexes, we just want to get all of this in the exact same positions. Well, this is smaller, so that's nice and bright. I think this is everything. Of course, as always, we will find out. So in total, we need 16 of them. Uh-oh. Are they gonna fit? Oh, easily. Wasn't even worried. We do need to get all this seeded up with resources. And iron got here, making plenty of barrels. Vrauk production slowly continues. We still have 13 of them left to make, essentially. That's why you don't want to make like one. Just make a handful, build your setup, and then see if you've got enough. And if not, just keep 3D printing them until you do. Okay, well, the cocoons and any potential spoilage can continue. The cocoons will have to stay to the left side of the belt here, and then they will be properly distributed. So those are going to make it in fine. This part at the end is where we're going to potentially have spoilage, and I'm not sure how fast it's going to spoil and whether or not one inserter handling it will be enough, but for now we'll just have one there. So now we can connect the whole thing. I would like to take some of the Vrauks out of these machines because we want to focus all of them down here. And hey, it looks like the sun is starting to come up. Fantastic. Let's grab some more creatures and let's just pick one to get it started. How about we do it in here? And it's really neat that when you put the modules in, you can actually see what they look like. They are very strange looking. And it's a 160-second craft. And with only 4 modules, it's going to take a little while. While we're waiting, another thing we want to plan for is what happens if we have some spoilage. We have a recipe here to repurpose the flora. We weren't using it before because it didn't really matter, but now we kind of do care, and the maximum of the belt would be 7.5, so it would actually only take 2 nurseries, and although we don't gain all of them back, on average we will gain 75% of them back, which is a pretty good ratio. And we have a couple of ways of doing this. We could process it right here and then send it up to the top of the setup, but that only works if we're actively producing creatures. A better option might be just to send the spoilage back as junk, and then we could process it at the source. The reason why I'm worried about using a splitter here is what happens if it decays in the splitter. But I don't know, I guess we could. Be kind of weird, but basically it would be this, and that would split the spoilage away. However, it is possible that one of them could spoil right there. So if so, that has an output, and it would just put on this other belt. And hopefully that would give us a very strong flow of spoilage. So how is all this working? Have we made a creature yet? Nope. And I would like to reuse this belt that has a bunch of stone on it. Right now there's very little stone, but this is going to be a relatively rare occurrence. So when it does happen, it's going to completely trash the belt, but it will be brief. They can go along the same path as the flora because they're all going to the same place in the end. And it's really simple. It just needs steam. Luckily it's nearby. It's funny how we suddenly have room for this because there's no iron mine here. And then the output is going to basically be some biomass, but mostly new flora. And biomass is a fuel. It's a pretty terrible one. Just 250 kilojoules, but nonetheless, it can be burned. And it's relatively nearby. That said, because its fuel value is so low, it's kind of awful. So instead, how about let's just send it straight into the steam pipe? And the way that we can make sure that there's room is on each of our steam power plants. We can just have an underflow valve, and in this situation, we can set it to 90%. And there we go, it's at 90. Put a splitter in here, pull off the biomass to the right, and then it can just send the steam back in. And we have this in place now that we could technically send the spoilage from this setup as well, but I'm guessing this setup is actually going to move. It's not going to stay there, but we can throw the biomass in there and you see how quickly it goes through it. Like no inserter could ever hope to keep up with that. Really don't want to be going over the patch like this, but it will continue, I suppose. So if we had some to test, we could. But for now, how about let's just unhook it. So when the spoilage does happen and it gets here, we can hook it up and test it. But otherwise, that is how it would work. And we've got some more Vrauks, but I really hope by now some of them have grown naturally. And sure seems like it. Well, let's put the new ones in. And there we go, we've got 2. And we can put them in there and it will continue. So it's going to take a little while for this to get going, but it will. We'll just use the Vrauks that are growing naturally and the ones we are printing until it seems like we have a healthy population. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we are going to get ready for the next science pack, including making things like caravans, which will greatly enhance our logistics. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.